I'll begin. Tēnā koutou, nau mai haere mai. We will begin with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hau hu. Tihei mauri ora. No te kuiti ahau, kei te atatu ahau I noho ana, kei sport waitakere, healthy families waitakere ahau I mahi ana, ko Caitlin me kau ahau no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai haere mai ki Teenage Systems Change in Action webinar. We are joined by two great speakers today. Welcome, Jacqui and Julio. They are from our Healthy Families South Auckland team, just across the way from us, and they are based at the Southern Initiative, which is under the Auckland Council umbrella or part of Auckland Council. So kia ora korua. As always, big thank you to Priscilla Tui Samoa. She is my team member helping out online today. Kia ora, Priscilla. Before I hand over to our speakers, some tikanga for this webinar. Please put any questions or comments that you have for Julio or Jacqui into the chat here on Zoom. If you're joining us live on Facebook, just make a comment on Facebook. So we will have Jacqui speaking first. We will hand straight over to Julio, and I will put your questions, your patai to them at the end. We just do that in case they answer your questions throughout, so we leave it right to the very end. But let's get started. I'll hand the rākau over to Jacqui. Kia ora, Jacqui.
Kia ora, Caitlin. Thank you so much. Sharing. Awesome. So yeah, thank you again to Caitlin and Priscilla for inviting Julio and I to talk today. It's always a real privilege to be able to share what we've been doing and learning with everyone, and it's been a wonderful series for us to learn from as well. I will let Julio introduce himself. So I'll just get into my own who I am. Kia ora koutou, ko ora ka te maunga te ru me tapinaka, pahe nui te awa e mahea ni aku mā harahara, no Hong Kong ahau, e mihi ana ki ngā tohu o nehe o Tāmaki Makaurau, e noho nei au, ko Jacqui taku ingoa. So I was born in Hong Kong and I grew up in Tāmaki Makaurau with a short stint in Aotearoa, Dunedin. I live in Manukau at the moment and I work at the Southern Initiative team in the Healthy Families South Auckland team with a focus on food systems and wellbeing in local governments. So today I will be talking about what our team has been doing and learning in our work to navigate local government, Auckland Council for systems change. I'll start with a quick overview of our team and then move into the opportunity of working with Auckland Council as a health promoting organisation, and then focus mainly on how we have worked and learned to grow a forest or a culture of wellbeing across Auckland Council under what we call the healthy environment approach. And before I move on, I'd just like to acknowledge our Auckland Council colleagues without whom none of this work would have been possible. My teammates, both past and present, and our external organisational partners at Healthy Families Waitakere, Michelle, I think I saw you join earlier, and Fiona Baggett. So, Healthy Families South Auckland, we are one of 10 or 11 sites across Aotearoa that are part of the Healthy Families New Zealand initiative. At Healthy Families South Auckland, we're hosted by two organisations. The first of which is the Course Collective, the Pacific Social Change Agency, who I think presented last week on their great work in Play Streets. And then the second organisation is where I'm based, the Southern Initiative, where Julio and I work and based at Auckland Council, as Caitlin mentioned earlier. So Healthy Families New Zealand very deliberately chose to host organisations that were not traditionally a health organisation because they wanted to get that wider systems change across sectors that across social, political, economic, physical activity, everything, to get better impacts for health and wellbeing of our communities. So it was really great for Auckland Council to acknowledge their role in supporting whānau wellbeing and put up their hands to be part of the Healthy Families New Zealand initiative. This meant that when our TSI Healthy Families team started thinking about what they could do, a natural place to start and focus was on our Auckland Council systems and colleagues and teams. We needed to get our own house in order, as it were, and leverage off the incredible influence that Auckland Council and other local government has on the systems that impact on the health and well-being of our whānau. The thing is, like many other local government organisations, Auckland Council is super complex, and particularly complex as a super city organisation spanning an area that houses a population of about 1.6 million people. And in its complexity is mirrored in its layers of decision making and working. So we've got a mayor, and then we've got councillors in the governing body, we've got local boards, we've got the organisation itself, we've got the independent Māori statutory board, just lots and lots of different decision making processes. And Auckland Council also covers a wide range of community facing operations that could all be leveraged to support the well-being of our whānau, including things like libraries, events, leisure centres, art centres, etc. So the opportunity facing our team back in 2017 was to figure out what to do and how to do it. And a natural instinct might be to start up top with the mayor and the councillors and get their support for transformative change that we wanted to achieve. However, this can take a lot of time and often needs to be really well timed and can often have to be reframed or readjusted to fit certain political or strategical needs and timing. It can also be short-lived and tied to a certain political persona or program that could change and shift over time. Our team took a different approach, which I think this whakatauki encapsulates really well. Ko tahi karihi nana ko te wao tapu nui a tāne. The creation of the forests of Tāne comes from one kernel. So basically, our team approach in this whakatauki thought that we should just start with one kernel or seed at a time and trust the process to add on and grow into a forest of transformative change. This approach is intended to be more long-term and systems change focused, and really importantly allowed time and space for testing and learning about how we can actually achieve systems change around well-being. We weren't tied to a big political promise that we had to keep up with, and we were able to flex and adapt to whichever team we were working with at the time. We could also build up the value and demonstrate impacts of how we were working for that bigger change. So our kernel that we started with back in 2017 was events. It was a really good place for us to start, as our team was already working with our Healthy Auckland Together partners to create healthier food environments at events. We were able to test and learn from working in that space, and since then we have spread to other areas as well as decision-making levels within council, and started really creating our own forest. We call this forest that we're creating the healthy environment approach. So something that was really critical to us growing this forest was to start the process right. Traditionally in public health and in local government, subject matter experts are asked to come in, provide their expert judgment and advice and evidence, and then provide some sort of recommendations for policies or practices, etc. And they're not normally involved much in the actual operational delivery of it. For our team, we knew that being subject matter experts wasn't really going to achieve the long-lasting regenerative systems change that we wanted to see or we're hoping for. We needed to get our hands dirty alongside our Auckland Council colleagues. And as his whakatauki says, e naki ana amua, ke toto mai ana e amuri, first clear the weeds, then plant. we needed to get our hands dirty and really understand what was happening at Auckland Council and figure out where the weeds or the blockages or the limitations, restraints were, and also what needed to be planted in terms of whānau aspirations. So in that sense, we used the 6 conditions of systems change framework, which has been really useful for our team in synthesizing down systems change into some practical actions and critical shifts. We also did 6 months of insight gathering at events. This was our first time ever working in this space, and we wanted to really get it right and understand what was happening. We talked to hundreds of event goers, event organizers, food vendors, anyone who was kind of involved or associated with events to get that rich in-depth lived experience that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise because from where we were sitting as a team. And since then, as we have spread out our healthy environment approach to other teams, we have done the same thing. We have done kanohi kete kanohi empathy interviews with our Auckland Council colleagues at every step, because we acknowledge that our systems and the political, social, environmental state of what we're working in constantly changes and fluxes. For example, COVID in 2020 was a real game changer in terms of the priorities and ways that our council colleagues were working. And this needed, and we needed to understand again the shifts and the realities. A critical part of the, figuring out what the current state was and where we wanted to go was to figure out what we needed to do. And part of that process, we needed to, as this whakatauki says, popoia te kaka no kia puawai, we needed to nurture the seeds so that it will bloom. We didn't want to just understand the state of Auckland Council and wellbeing and then provide some recommendations and move away. We knew that in systems change, we needed to put in, hands dirty. We needed to invest in time and effort in relationships to ensure that we will actually work and shift the system towards where we wanted it to be. So the first thing that we did was we needed to nurture the kaitiaki or kaimahi, our Auckland Council colleagues, so that they would have the full capability to nurture the seeds. It's one thing to dream about what you wanted to achieve. It's one thing to want to support the well-being of our whānau and children and communities. It's another thing to have the true capability to do so. So we knew that we needed to start with where they were and put in the time and effort to strengthen relationships and provide support we needed. And a key part of this was to develop co-design workshops with our colleagues where we were able to build the trust and respect between us so that they would feel open to sharing their true lived experiences and their thoughts and their aspirations. And we also did co-design work to ideate and support their dreaming and their aspirations for a future that was that would really support them, to support the well-being of the whānau that they were working with. We also, through these co-design workshops, we also designed really practical principles and guidelines that were co-designed with the actual people who would be using them. I think often traditionally in a lot of sectors, guidelines and policies and principles are designed by some people in a team high up in the ministry and then applied to the practitioners. And from my own personal experience and our team's experience, this doesn't really work in terms of being fit for purpose, getting buy-in, actually working. And so by co-designing these practical resources with the kaimahi, it was the language that they understood, that they felt familiar with. It was their own words often that were coming out. So there was really great buy-in. And then we also really focused on nurturing the kaimahi in a relational way as opposed to transactional way. We weren't there to just extract their lived experiences to then design a resource. We were there to develop deep relationships and connections with them so that we could share our values of well-being and find where we had what we had in common so that we would all feel committed towards this work. and this is a massive key in the success of our creating our forest today. Another part of nurturing that we really was critical to our work was to nurture the right conditions for growing. So for us, this meant that we needed to have a really strong focus on shifting the 6 conditions of systems change. And for us in our role as healthy families, we knew that we needed to hold the risk whenever necessary to enable the whānau and kaitiaki or kaimahi to continuing, innovating and growing. So as I've mentioned before, this is the 6 conditions of system change framework that we use. And some examples of what we did to hold the risk and shift the conditions included securing local board adoption and integration into work programs. So this was really important in making the healthy environment approach work that we were doing an actual policy and mandate across Auckland Council to get more buy-in. It also meant that there was resource flow, funding and accountability from local boards to be committed to furthering this work. Another thing that we did was to amplify staff in whānau for us. This was critical to balancing out the power dynamics between leadership, management and the kaimahi who were actually on the ground trying to create the changes in well-being that we were trying to achieve. By capturing their thoughts and their voices in the kanohi empathy workshops and bringing them up to management to show the actual realities, it was really important to demonstrate to the staff and our colleagues that we weren't just there to extract, we were there for them, that we were on their side and we were there to support them. Something else that we did was to provide seed funding ourselves. And also to support budget reset business cases. This is really important to ensure that there was adequate resource flow so that what the things that we were testing around how to get more wellbeing processes in our colleagues' BAU could happen. And this was also really important to get change mindsets in both staff and leadership around the value of wellbeing. And lastly, something that we needed to do was to make practice easier for the colleagues that we're working with. So we did things like set up a procurement system that already had the healthy menus and recipes all loaded in. So the kaimahi didn't have to think every week what they needed to buy for the children that week or the menus that they needed to provide. It was all loaded and the delivery was to the doorstep. So they didn't have to spend all this unnecessary time and stress and anxiety and using that free time to really connect with the children and the communities that we were working with for that wellbeing outcomes. To keep up the momentum of what we were doing, it was also really important to celebrate what we were achieving. Systems change is such a long slog, and often the impacts and effects of what we're doing is really far down the line. So there's the whakatauki that you might be familiar with about how the kumara does not speak of its own sweetness. However, I think this whakatauki is important too. Me te wai kokari, like the nectar of the flax flower. We should appreciate and acknowledge the beauty of our world and what we've been doing. It's okay to celebrate, particularly the small stuff, as that's what's going to keep us going in this work. And so some successes that we have seen is the healthy environment approach being integrated in the community grants process. This was really cool because instead of us going to events after the fact of them getting funding for an event and making sure that they were doing healthy environment approach work like healthy food and no smoking and all that stuff, they were required at the application for funding to prove that they were going to be committed to providing a healthy environment at their events. And this was really cool to get the buy-in from our community, from our council colleagues, and saying that this is something that's well-being is important to us. And this is something that we're going to think about when we give you funding. And so a lot of the shift of responsibility and ownership moved from us to the community and our colleagues in that process. Something else that I think was really important to celebrate was that by building those relationships and shifting in power dynamics on their behalf, the team felt much more listened to, the colleagues that we were working with, and this really made them more confident to buy into what we were doing. They felt more ownership and confidence in innovating and thinking more about how they could support the well-being of the communities and children that they were working with. And then lastly, we really heard of how the changes that we were working with our teams led to really far-reaching effects. So in the leisure centre, early childhood centre programs, the children in whānau were able to enjoy healthy menus, which really allowed whānau to feel full confidence that they were sending their children to a really cool place that was going to support their well-being. And it also alleviated a lot of the stress on the families to have to provide healthy food, because they knew that the children were at least getting some during the day. So now we're at a stage today where we're well on our way to creating a forest of well-being through the healthy environment approach at Council. In terms of next steps, we are continuing to strengthen our relationships and connections, and strongly focusing on embedding into the team culture and processes. So these are things like KPIs, programming frameworks, service agreements, etc. I just really like to acknowledge that much of the scaling up and spreading into other teams has not just been us as a team advocating for it. You know, the deeper relationships that we're building with our colleagues, they are telling their own colleagues about the great stuff and the value that they have been seeing in being part of this healthy environment approach. And that's really cool, because this intrinsic motivation and team culture and valuing is going to make sure that we can biodegrade out as a team, and the ownership and values of the teams around this work will just grow as we move out. So yes, this is really the end of my very quick overview of how we have been working in local government. And yeah, I think if you want to have any more information, Winnie Horaki, who's here today, and myself are always open if you wanted to ask for any more details about what we have been doing at every step. I know that I gave very high level overviews of what we've done, but we definitely have a lot more practical, detailed information as well. So thank you.
Kia ora, Jacqui. I mean, it was great how you provided a really good picture of all your different components that make up your council system, or our council system, and how you started small with events, and then you've spread out to all across council. It is now my pleasure to hand over to Julio Bin, if you want to share your slides. Kia ora, Julio.
Thank you, Caitlin and Priscilla. Let me just find my slides here. Yeah, there you are. Kia ora koutou. Thank you all for being here today. Ko Julio taku ingoa. I am a Biwi, a Brazilian-born Kiwi, and it's always great to present after Jacqui, because she's almost makes me feel like I don't need to present anything, because everything is already there. But it's good. I can focus on the Good Food Roadmap, which is what I'm gonna try to do for you guys today. So I've been working with Auckland Council TSI since the Southern Initiative since 2014, and joined the Healthy Families South Auckland team in 2018. So my work with TSI/Healthy Families has been focused on sustainable local economy, community-led enterprises, food security, food sovereignty, and local food resilience. But today I'm going to really focus on a Good Food Roadmap, and it's actually I was thinking yesterday, and the genesis of the Good Food Roadmap was actually into 2016, when I was working, was helping Auckland Council Sustainability Office to write a blueprint for a sustainable food system alliance. For some reason, I can't change my, oh yeah, manage. So yeah, so that document, at that time, I had to research and check what other regions and in New Zealand and what other countries were doing in terms of food charters and food alliances and food policies, etc. And I found amazing secondary information online, and also I had a contact with amazing other councils in New Zealand that were doing some amazing work. And I realized that there is no lack of knowledge or initiatives across many different stakeholders. But most of the documents that I found were using different terminologies to address the same kind of a problems. So it was, I think, was only in 2019, after the C40 Good Food Cities Declaration, that the idea of the Good Roadmap actually came along. So I thought of, I think the best way for me to use the 20 minutes we have now would be to unpack the Good Food Roadmap for you guys, so you can understand the rationale behind and how it can be used as a framework, a strategic framework towards food security and food sovereignty. I know some of you, but not everyone that's watching this. So even not knowing what is your mahi or your mandate, I know that we are all members of a community, that we are all whānau members as well, that we love eating, that we have our personal views and traditions and experiences involving food, which allows everyone to have an opinion when it comes to food systems. And that's one of the things that I found through this work, that everyone you talk to does have a position about food systems, because of this emotional and individual relationship that we all have with food. So let me start asking a few questions just to get to set the scene. As understanding that food systems operates within, and it is influenced by social, cultural, political, economical, and environmental context. As a collective and society, and as a society, what can we do to achieve zero hunger in our communities? And what's your role as an individual towards that goal? What can we do to minimize food waste? What can we do to stop nutritional inequality? How can we support food sovereignty, placing the control of food back into the communities? How can we all support the development of sustainable, fair, healthy food systems delivering nutrition and food security for all? You don't need to answer, and I just want you to think about it. But this is a very tricky and complex questions within our very complex food system. And it requires like a multi-stakeholder engagement. It requires involving farmers, retailers, food processors, technology providers, financial institutions, local and central government, community and consumers to think together. And also requires actions across all these stakeholders. The issue here is that it is quite easy to ask questions, and I'm sure we could spend the next 20 minutes, the next 20 hours, or even the next 20 years asking questions, possibly getting stuck in the problem and solution statement cycle. And there are always new problems to add to the equation, like climate change, for example, natural disasters, economic instability, epidemics, pandemics that we all know very well now how it works. Why we have a systems change approach, which you already saw from Jacqui's presentation, it's because we are dealing with systemic problems, which means that the problems that we have are embedded in the system itself. It also means that there is no single answer to those questions. There is no silver bullet. What we need is collective action and critical shifts, tackling the conditions holding problems in place, moving towards an ideal system. And when it comes to food, we could also spend the next 20 minutes or 20 years defining what is the ideal system. So the Good Food Roadmap does not offer that solution, does not offer the answers. It only helps to ground our understanding and to align our perspectives, no matter what angle or individual mandates. It is not a guide or a model or a formula or a template. Its purpose is to instigate thinking, is to instigate systemic thinking based on what we know and help deciding what are the critical shifts required to move from where we are now to an ideal scenario where everyone should be able to access good food at all times. Once again, as individuals and collective, we all understand the importance of food in our lives. We just need to understand and believe how food can be a catalyst for change. And at systems change level, that means a catalyst for change, for social change, for cultural change, for economic, environmental changes. So the Good Food Roadmap is a framework to help organizing the thought, to help decision-making process, and to help defining actions as a collective. The diagram is a visual representation of a three-part document divided into a common goal, which is a very short rationale based on evidence and facts, a vision and a mission with 5 ideal scenarios and some of the facts endorsing those scenarios, and an action plan with action points to exemplify each one of the scenarios, the 5 scenarios. All the information in this document is not based on assumptions, but facts. It is a changing narrative without losing the evidence. It is designed to help recognizing what is a great initiative, and also for us to understand what we should avoid doing. And all of that to move towards resilient and sustainable food systems. Language, it's key in the process of trying to simplify the complexity of the food system. And that is why we wanted to keep it short and simple. There's only 3 pages of the document and this diagram. The diagram actually shows the 5 ideal scenarios and potential action points that could help creating a resilient local food system. The scenarios are related to food equity, that first line, food sovereignty, food culture and traditions, food for health and well-being, and food resilience, and which all are part of a path or a pathway towards food security and food sovereignty. So the simplicity of this diagram hides the complexity within the challenge. The intention is to visually identify good enough goals that you might question a word or terminology, but not the overall intention. For example, when we come here to this corner, we state that everyone in Aotearoa New Zealand should be able to access good food at all times. I can change there. We can just write everyone should be able to access good food at all times. I don't think anyone would dispute with that. It's a problem that we have in New Zealand. It's a problem we have anywhere in the world. We also define what is good food here. Again, terminology might be different, but again, it's good enough for us to carry on with what good food means. And why we decided to use good food and not healthy food, because working with our communities, we understood that healthy has different meanings and might not necessarily mean good food. We also here, very, very visually can show where we are in terms of food insecurity and food dependency, and how is that is a result of our food system. And then again, through going through this, the ideal scenarios, we get to a resilient local food system and maybe towards a food security and food sovereignty scenario, ideal system. And why towards and not a definite indication of a place? Because the only thing that we are 100% sure here is where we are now today. And we can assure you, and we all can agree that we have a food insecurity and food dependency situation, even after, more even clearly now after COVID. So let me see, where am I now? Okay. So to illustrate how the the Good Food Roadmap has been used, I would like to share a few examples of how the roadmap have been adopted and sometimes adapted by different organizations. It has been supported and adopted by some of Auckland Council local boards, including all 4 local boards in South Auckland. Also recommended in the Auckland Climate Plan as a framework to support community resilience to the impact of climate change. It has been adapted by Te Whanau o Waiperera in West Auckland in their Ngā Kai community document. And it's a very simple way of using the Good Food Roadmap to establish 5 guiding points here. It has been supported, it has been adapted as well, adopted and adapted by our colleagues in Healthy Families Wanganui, creating their own Wanganui Good Food Roadmap. And I love this drawing here because it's this from the initial kōrero they have with the community. And you can see the representation of the 5 ideal scenarios here. The 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is just a really lovely way of engaging with community and finding out how to use those 5 ideal scenarios. And also, the roadmap has been recently used in this amazing report, also from the Wanganui team, and I do recommend looking at it. And on this same report, the Good Food Roadmap has been redesigned. So this is the redesigned version of the roadmap by our colleague Dave, which is an awesome work he's done here to again adapt to the local challenge and local need. Anyway, I'm really, I think, yeah, I'm getting close to my time here. I hope that this has been enough for you to have an idea, a very, very simplistic idea of what the Good Food Roadmap is and how it could be used. There is no IP in this Good Food Roadmap. Okay, it's an open source. So feel free to adapt to your region, to your challenges. The main purpose here of putting this together was to have a consistency in approach, efficiency in the use of available resources, and to increase our collaboration and collective impact. It is a long and challenging journey towards food security and food sovereignty, as we all know, and we are in different walkers, but I'm sure we can get to food sovereignty and to food security by understanding where we are now and knowing where we need to get to. If you need, I'm really, really happy to expand this kōrero and help with the adapting process in your case or in your region. I just would like to finish with this quote from Wainona Leduc to inspire and to reinforce the need for our mahi, our continuous research, our continuous energy and desire to challenge and rethink the system, because it doesn't matter what you do or where you are or where you're from as a professional, as an individual, as a whānau and community member. Just look at the potential around you and see how food can really be a catalyst for systems change. Thank you, guys. I think that's all for me.
Kia ora, Julio. That was, yeah, beautiful, nice, short, quick explanation of something that was a mammoth task. It was good to hear your journey about, you know, getting all of that information and bringing it all into one succinct, clear, I think it's 5 pages, is it? The Good Food Roadmap?
Yeah, well, it's 3 parts. Yeah,
yes.
5 pages plus the diagram.
Yeah. Yeah, no, ngā mihi, it's awesome. We do have some comments here from Winnie Hauraki. To Jacqui, it was a great demonstration of how you and your team have to work across multiple levels, don't you, to achieve that systems change. And she's also made a point about local food systems that centre on local food production and circular economy will be more important than ever to ensure our communities can not just get food, but also get food that supports their well-being, financial security and the environment. And you're totally right, Julio. I mean, everyone touches food in some kind of way through it every day, don't we? And the system is so complex. And you're totally right. I mean, if you think of all the numbers of people, the numbers of organisations all involved, it's huge. And I like what you said about the language as well, and the use of the word healthy and the use of the word well-being. As well, you're really important to consider. And Winnie's also got a question here, which is actually for Julio, which I'll put to you now. Julio, what is one simple action that people could do or start doing tomorrow to contribute to food security and food sovereignty?
That's one of those questions that we can spend the next 20 minutes or 20 years.
We've got time.
I think, again, for me, it helped me to understand the system itself. You know, some people say that we have to understand the perversity of the system to actually act as a positive deviant. You know, it's really, really easy to just become a deviant and say, oh, we're doomed, you know, this is not going to work. It's very complex. Yeah. It is. But once you understand that it is complex, that it is not going to be easy. And when we look at our communities, you know, if it's hard for us that we have access to a lot of information and a lot of resources, imagine it out there, you know, every day it's a new challenge. And then again, that's why I talked about all those different variables that add not just to the system itself, but add to our daily lives, to the daily normal, you know, family and whānau that are out there. And COVID was an amazing example of how that increased the tension and the stress within our communities. So I think the one simple thing to do, it's understanding where we are. You know, understand what really food insecurity means. Again, there's too many definitions of what food insecurity is. And understanding what is food dependency. I mean, why we should move from food dependency to food sovereignty. What is the journey? And I think it might not be that simple as when you want to be, but it is by understanding what we have today and where we are, it might become simple to see the initiatives that we really should be investing and directing our resources, and the things that we should be stopping, you know, fading out from it. That's the conversation that we had with local boards. We hope that a strategic framework will help the decision-making process of analyzing, oh, look, we have these two initiatives, which one we should direct funding, which one we should support more, and which ones we should actually stop supporting because it's not helping with our food independence or independency or food sovereignty and food security. So yeah, I don't know if that was a short, simple answer, but
it was great. You got a thumbs up, so thank you. I have a question for you, Jacqui, which it relates to what Julio was just talking about, actually. What were some of the grants that were given out, the community grants you mentioned, where the Healthy Environments Framework had been part of that grants process? What were some of the things that happened on the ground in the community? Were they events, or what were some of the grants given?
Yeah, so Winnie might be able to give more detail, but so each local board has a community grants budget that they set to fund community activities. So the community grants that we were able to influence were in the South local board. So this is Rangareo Tahuhu, Papakura, Manarewa, and Otara Papatoetoe. And this included grants for community events, Auckland Council run events, sport and rec, arts and culture as well. So it covers quite a wide breadth of activities and community things as well. So
Yeah,
it's quite far-reaching.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a question for the two of you. You can choose what has been in this whole yourselves and your journey as systems practitioners. What has been a highlight in this whole time, or what's your biggest learning? Biggest highlight or biggest learning? You can choose. I'll start with you, Jacqui, since you're on.
Yeah, I think the biggest highlight is just how everyone truly cares about well-being. You know, it's no one ever came to our face and being like, that's dumb. Why would you want to add another thing to our already busy workload? You know, everyone did really want to strive towards working well-being. It was often just the conditions around them that might have been preventing them. So it was really motivating to know that you know, we're not alone, I guess. And then I think in terms of a learning, we really focused on building the healthy environment approach into team culture and processes and BAU and funding. Firstly, because council and local government always seems to be in restructure mode. And when things are restructured, teams are moved around, work programs get changed. If we can build that value of well-being into pre-existing team cultures, there's more of a chance of them carrying on to the new structures as well. And another thing is that by building it into the culture, something that we really learned was that our contracts are not permanent. It's not always secured, and we also don't want to be in there forever. It's not for us to stay in council working on well-being. It's for them to take ownership of it. So it's easier said than done, I will have to say. You know, in this most recent restructure of our Auckland Council colleagues, there was a lot of lost relationships. We hadn't quite reached the stage of embedding it into the culture. So now we have to restart with some of the newer teams. But it is definitely both the hardest part, but the most effective part.
Kia ora, Jacqui, and that's totally part of it, isn't it? The consistently changing environment, that you're working in. Julio, a highlight or a learning?
How long we have?
We have 10 minutes. We've got one more question here, though, from Stella. So you got 5 minutes.
No, it was for me again. I know there's lots of highlights, I think, in this journey. But one I think it goes back to language. You know, again, I have been working in this kind of with this kaupapa for a long time, and it's easy to get trapped into writing things, you know, writing documents and writing charters and writing, you know. And I think if you're going to be if you're going to use systems thinking, you got to be using that, or got to be doing that as community. You have to place yourself next to the people that you're working for, which is, it's our people, you know. We're not doing this to please politicians or pen pushers or whatever, you know. The idea of putting documents together in my mind today is actually to see if it works for the community. If I can sit down with my community partners, you know, with the mamas and papas, and I can sit down with this good food roadmap and have a kōrero with them and go through with them and see if it makes sense to them, then it makes sense to my work. It makes sense. It might become reality. And then we have the endorsement of the people that really should be endorsing our work. And then I just realized that, because after doing all this, going through this journey of writing this, again, there's amazing resources on, you know, you can find information, any type of information regarding what is a resilient food system or food security or food sovereignty? It's all there, but it's in a way it's a bit confusing, and then again, if you go and talk to community, I don't blame them not to want to hear. So I think our job is to simplify the complexity, not just for us, but also for our community, so that can become action, so that can become something that really makes sense, and not just another document that we can, tick box and then use as a report. So yeah, I think that's the main learning for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love your mention of action in that word, hey? Action in the community, not just the action of writing the document. This is a question here from Stella O'Connor. Do you have any ideas, examples with engaging with councils and how they can align or support the Good Food Roadmap? So often the focus is on infrastructure. I think that's to you, Julio, but you can also add something if you like, Jacqui.
Yeah, hello, Stella. Kia ora for that. I can send you a lot of information. We can have a separate kōrero on that. But yeah, going through the process of getting the Good Food Roadmap adopted by the local boards in South Auckland, I think the first, what I realized that there was a lack of the strategic framework to start with. There was a lack of information or reliable information to really help the local boards to decide what to do and to decide what not to do. It's really, and they have pressures, there's a lot of pressure to local board members, to councillors and politicians to decide to do things. And sometimes again, because of the complexity and the vast amount of information that's available, you kind of get, you lose yourself in that, trying to find what is a way to think about the system itself. So I think the Good Food Roadmap, it's again, it helped those local board members to have, we have something here that we can rely on. At least it's not based on assumptions. It's based on facts. It's based on a lot of research. So there's nothing here that's being created. It's all part of the system. It's just organized in a different way. So I think the process, it's getting into those councils and going through the rationale again, how this was developed, why it was developed, and then get them to understand how this can benefit them in the decision-making process. But I'm happy to have that kōrero with you, Stella, and any other one that actually having the same problem.
Was that did you just have one-on-one meetings with councillors or members of the local boards and council people, or did you present at certain meetings?
Yeah. The Auckland Council, that's how it works. You make a time for one of their meetings, and then you go there and present. I think I'm pretty sure what the Wanganui team did exactly the same thing with their. Here in Auckland, we have the different councils, local boards. In Wanganui, they had a presentation which is online, and it's an amazing Tom. It's not there anymore, unfortunately, but he's done an amazing job of defending the case and actually introducing the Good Food Roadmap to the councillors in Wanganui. So yeah, I think the way is by doing that, but you also have to do a little bit of a research before on what they're doing, what they're not doing. So it's kind of you have enough information to go and actually defend your case.
Awesome, thank you. And Winnie has put one last comment here, which I think summarizes the talk and kind of wraps it up for us really nicely, which is redesign thinking about how to activate conditions for well-being across the different levels of environments, policies, behaviours, social and cultural infrastructure that strengthen and promote protective factors. Kia ora, Winnie. Thank you very much for your comment. We haven't got any more questions, so I will close. And thank you, Julio and Jacqui, for taking the time to share your kōrero, but also to prepare for today. We will be sending the slides and the recording out in a few days' time. So anyone on this call will be able to share this recording far and wide. Ngā mihi. Thank you, Joe. Just saw your comment there. Thank you, everyone who's taken the time to listen always. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa mō tō tautoko. I'll just close us with the karakia. Pau hihiri, pau rarana, pau o te whakaaro, pau o te tangata, pau o te aroha, te pau I hiri nei I a tātou, mauri ora ki a tātou, hongi e, hui e, tai ki.
Kia ora, Kaina.
Ngā manaakitanga, everybody.
Kia ora, thank you.
Ka kite, take
Ka
care.
kite.
Kia ora, Winnie.